Hello, and welcome back. In this video, we're talking about live scripts, what they are, how to work with them, and what that's going to result in for the labs for this class. So everything for this class will use a live script. All the format files that you'll start to build your labs from will be live scripts. So what are those? Well, a script is MATLAB's terminology for a program, and so here I have opened just a plain, normal script file, and I can write code in it. I can make comments, and that's fine. What live scripts do is they take this and allow you to do a lot more fancy things with it. They allow for WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, editing of the document. They allow for direct export to PDF, and they allow embedding of graphs and output images into those PDFs. So let's now look at a live script, which I have a demo here that is currently blank, but we can do this with it too. I can sort of just have a variable that's going to print to the output line. And if I run this by clicking the run button up here at the top of the screen, the output here shows up on the right. And that's because I have this top button here selected for output on right. I could select embedded output, which puts things in line like this, or remove the code entirely, which is not really useful. I prefer this first one for being able to see both the code and the output side by side. We can also do graphs using this setup, and I'll put a simple graph in here now, which you type that in, nothing shows up. Because this is a script, you have to run the script for anything to show up. I can now click the run button, and I will see the graph on the screen there. It's a graph of x squared from 0 to 5. That's what it should look like. And this gives you a way to sort of view both your code and the images side by side, be able to tweak things, see the outputs, and have it all laid out nicely there in the file. Now, in terms of live scripts, there are two main modes for entering text. There is code mode, which we're in right now. Whatever we type is going to be viewed as MATLAB code. We can type actual code and MATLAB will actually run it and execute it. And then there's text mode. So if I go to the top of the file here, put a line break in there, go above and click on text mode here on the top of the screen in this live editor toolbar, right? This is the new toolbar that shows up when you have an editor screen selected. If I click off, it stays, but it's only going to be helpful for being in the actual editor window. If I click text, it changes. So this gray box sort of cut off, and now I'm sitting above this gray box, and now I can type whatever I want, and that's not going to be run. It's going to sit there as a comment and just be there in the file as well. You can also still put comments in the code, or if I go into this code block and still do a %sign, you can still do that if you want to indicate certain lines. But now if you want to type actual text in between chunks of code, you can do that with these text blocks. You can also put a title by changing the text format up here in this text box from normal to, say, title. You can also bold, italic, underline, any sort of formatting you want to put, you can do with this sort of formatter here. It works more like a Microsoft Word type formatter at this point because it's running like a word processor. So demo script, I can make that the title. And I can do all the stuff that I want. I can format things, title things, whatever I want between these code. I can have a code block. I can say between these two, let's put a text block in here. I can break things up, write some comments, fill in some details of what I'm doing in the code in between each of these little blocks of code. Beyond that, there are also section breaks, which are really useful for making it if you don't want to run the entire script all at once. You can run individual pieces to try to debug and find errors, or if you're only working on one part and you know there's errors later on and you're only trying to fix the first part first, you can just run that first part and see what's going on. And so section breaks are in this other box up here at the top, section break with run section, run in advance, run to end. So after this x equals 2, I can put a section break. I'm going to get rid of this line first and then click on section break here at the top, and there it is. Now MATLAB views these as two separate sections. So what I can do now is use the run section button to just run either of these one at a time to change things. So I can just say, let's make this say 7 instead, and I can just run this section. It'll run the first part, change it to a 7, but it won't try to regenerate the graph, which can be nice if you have sort of images later that you don't want to regenerate, but you want to run certain code elsewhere in things. So you can run section, which will just run the one section there. Run in advance is the next command. What that will do is that will run the section and then move your cursor into the one after it. So if I do that now here, it then runs it, makes it 7. If I change the number, it would change the number, and then kicks me into the next section. So I can do run section or run in advance again to run that section. It basically allows you to step through chunk by chunk to make sure everything is working correctly. Run to end will start from the current section and run the rest of the code, as sort of expected. The last things you need are, again, these run commands here, which are present for normal scripts as well. Live scripts have the bonus of these having these special section breaks in them. So run runs the entire file top to bottom, step runs one line at a time, and stop will stop the code if it's running and has an infinite loop or something. Now, one thing to recommend for these scripts is testing these in the command line, right? So if I'm not sure how some code works, I can test it in the command line before I put it in the script, before it embeds and causes other problems. If it causes errors, I can test it and see how it all works. Right. Now, the last thing to mention for live scripts is the output capabilities. So live scripts have a distinct benefit of being able to natively export to PDF, meaning you can take a code and you can just save it as a PDF right from Matlab, as opposed to having to do some weird workaround with HTML to get to a PDF output of your file that could be emailed, submitted, handed, or whatever you want to do with the PDF from there. There's a couple things to realize about this. First of all, just typing the code and then saving to PDF will not generate any images. When you save as a PDF, Matlab does not run the file first. So you will need to run the file before you make the images. So for instance, I could try to change this range to go from -5 to 5, but if I just right now go to save as a PDF, by going to the top here, clicking the down arrow by save, and then export to PDF, I can click that, and then clicking to save it in the same directory because why not? It's going to do some weird expandy thing on the images, and then the PDF pops up. Let me now show you what this PDF looks like. And as expected, the image is the old image. Right? The image is still the graph from 0 to 5, even though the code here says -5 to 5. That's because I did not run the file before I generated the PDF. So now what I can do is let me close this PDF. Now we're going to run the file, export as PDF, and now we're good. Now we have the correct file in the correct format here and ready to go. The image matches the code, everything's great. The last thing to mention here briefly is that you have suppressing output with semicolons, because maybe this executable stuff is needed for the code, but I don't need it in the output. It's just a variable I need to save somewhere. If I do a semicolon and run it again, now it does actually suppress the output. So the output that you would get on the command line normally with a MATLAB script or MATLAB just running from the command line is what you see in the live script as well. It shows up here on the side, and then shows up in a proper location in the PDF when you run the file and save as a PDF. So this gives an easy way to write MATLAB code and get it to a nice, easily exportable file that can be used to send to someone who needs it or turn in for an assignment, anything like that. Two things to mention here at the end that could be useful and helpful when trying to work with scripts. And those are the clear and CLC commands. So CLC is a command that will clear the command line. That's not going to be useful now because nothing there. Clear will remove all of your variables. So it's really important to do this, and I would even recommend in most cases when you're running a script, starting with clear and CLC. What that will do is at the beginning of your script, wipe all of your variables and clear your command prompt to make sure that everything you are using in the script file was actually saved in the script file, right? So say I had some variable that I was using to determine, what the upper and lower endpoints of my thing were. So I could set here a equals 3. Now it's going to draw this graph from -3 to 3 because that's what I'm telling it to do here in this code. But now if I go to the command line and I redefine a to be 5, if I just click run section here, the graph goes from -5 to 5 because that's what a is. Even though a was defined here, I changed it and it worked here. But if I click the full run button, it'll get rid of this a and work the code just fine. The other half issue is say I don't have a here at all, this code will now run because I have stored the variable a in the main window in the command prompt. And this code's like, yeah, I know what a is fine. But if you were to do a fresh start of MATLAB or email this MATLAB file to someone else to run, theirs would not work because they have not saved the variable a. That's why this clear is important, because it makes sure that if you need a variable in your script, it is defined in the script. So if I get rid of this comment here and run the code now, it doesn't know what to do and it breaks because it doesn't know what a is. And here is the indicator. And here is the error it's assigned to. Note that for live scripts, the error does not show up in the command window. It shows up in the output over here on the side. This would tell you, okay, A is not defined. I got to deal with that before I can actually write this code. And you only saw that because the clear command got rid of an A that I had previously defined in the command window. This is a pretty simple example of this idea, but it can happen much more embedded, much more sort of in a nitpicky way. When you have variables with similar names and things that aren't working quite right, it might be because you haven't cleared your variables recently enough to make sure that nothing is overlapping with stuff you defined previously. So that's some stuff about live scripts, what they are, how they work, and how to get them to export to PDF, as well as get them to show your output in the window and see how that all plays together to give us a nice file that is an output from the lab that is a solid document that can be turned in as a finished product from that assignment.